All right, I got the action. So, in our passage from the Old Testament today, we read about 12 spies returning from their mission to observe the promised land. When they report back to their tribe, 10 of them say the inhabitants of the land were too big and too scary for them to even try to conquer it. But Caleb and Joshua, but mostly Caleb, stood before the people and said, if God is on our side, they don't stand a chance. Unfortunately, their argument isn't convincing enough, and the people decide to elect a new leader and head back to Egypt. This doesn't make God very happy. In the verses that follow, God announces to Moses the plan for dealing with their lack of faith, saying, none of the people who have seen my glory and the signs that I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and yet have tested me these 10 times and have not obeyed my voice, shall see the land that I swore to give to their ancestors. None of those who despise me shall see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit and has followed me wholeheartedly, I will bring into the land into which he went, and his descendants shall possess it. Historically, many churches have been guilty of ignoring or skipping over difficult Old Testament passages such like this. Passages that may give a difficult image of God that may be more angry or violent than we're used to, something that's maybe difficult to reconcile with our primary and often preferred image of the God who gave us Jesus. So, before anyone goes running over to Pastor Mark after the service to say, how come he gave Kyler the hard scriptures? I picked my own scriptures for today. And I'm actually really excited to share with you the beauty that I see in this story where God condemns an entire nation to die in the wilderness. Thank you. In order to understand this story, we first have to understand a crucial dynamic within these tribes marching from Egypt to Canaan. Essentially, it all boils down to a difference between two generations. The older generation has been on this journey the entire time. They were slaves in Egypt. They lived through the 10 plagues. They saw the Red Sea parted. They received the 10 commandments. They received manna from heaven, water from a stone, and they followed pillars of clouds and fire, which, by the way, must have been pretty bad at navigating since it took 40 years for a 2 to 3 month walk. But along the way, they built a golden calf, they doubted their leader Moses, and basically went, I'm hungry, and are we there yet? For 40 straight years. So, when they get up to the promised land and they've seen that all God has done for them this far, and they say, nope, too scary, can't do it, God is fed up. But there's another generation in the picture now, a generation born in the desert. And this generation isn't hung up by the same things that hindered their parents. They were never slaves like their parents, so they don't live like it. They were never conquered and captured, so they don't fear it. When they were hungry, they saw God provide food, and when they were thirsty, God provided water. And they grew up hearing the stories of the Red Sea parting and the plagues that defeated a stubborn Pharaoh. So in their minds, one thing is very clear. When God is on their side, nothing can stop them. So there in the wilderness, outside of the promised land of Canaan, God dubs the younger generation as the ones to go into and inherit the promised land, with the help of Caleb, of course. And God says Caleb will be the exception to the rule, that he will inherit the land as a member of the older generation because he has a different spirit and has followed God wholeheartedly. And as I read this verse, I began to wonder, what is it about the spirit of Caleb that sets him apart in the eyes of the Lord? Sure, he's shown that he has great faith, but it seems to be more than that. Since he was chosen to enter the promised land with those who were literally just children at the time, I thought he must have something in common with them. Which brings me to our gospel passage today, where Jesus says, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Unless you become like children, you will never enter the kingdom. The parallel here seems almost too good to be true. In the same way that there was something about the younger generation that makes them the perfect group to inherit the kingdom of Israel and the promised land, there's something about children, youth, and young people that brings the kingdom of God where they go. Often we have experiences in life that cause us pain, and that pain leads to fear, and fear can keep us from being able to see what God is doing all around us. But children don't have that problem. Caleb gets to join the younger generation because he has become like them, able to overcome the hardships he has experienced in life and ignore the overwhelming cynical voices around him to keep his eyes open and see where God is leading him. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, the younger generations today often get a bad rap. This is not a new phenomenon, by the way. Older generations pretty much have always found reasons to complain about their societal successors. But I can't tell you how many times, even during the last couple of months, I've heard about how millennials are so materialistic or self-centered, or how everyone from Gen Z is somehow both lazy and rebellious at the same time. And blanket statements like this are really pervasive, and they're really easy to say, so oftentimes we find them in places we might not even expect. For example, I sadly experienced this exact thing at May Youth Weekend at Holden Village this year, where the guest speaker spent all 4 sessions almost exclusively talking about how teens are so tied up in their phones that they don't know how to have relationships. But if you spend even a small amount of time regularly with people from these age groups, I'm sure that you, just like me, can recognize how false these blanket statements are. As just a couple of quick examples, divorce rates are plummeting because millennials are waiting longer to tie the knot, and the board game industry is surging because young people today love to get around a table and interact with their friends. So for the rest of my time today, I want to talk about 2 things. First, the incredible ways that young individuals are making our world a better place, and the importance of mentors to help them succeed. I'd like to start with the latter. In the early days of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg found himself struggling in his attempts to manage his company's incredible rate of growth. In fact, he had several offers to buy the company from him, and he was not sure exactly what he should do. So he did what any of us would do: sat down for coffee with Steve Jobs. And the advice that he got from Jobs wasn't what he expected. Jobs told him about a temple in India that he visited while he was starting Apple, and he recommended that Zuckerberg pack up and spend a month there. So that's exactly what he did. He visited the temple and traveled around India for a month, and afterwards Zuckerberg claimed that immersing himself in the different culture and seeing how the people interacted there it refocused and re-inspired him in the mission of his company. And stories like this aren't unusual. There are countless stories of mentors that save the day from their mentees. Oprah Winfrey learned how to responsibly manage her influence from her friend and mentor Maya Angelou. Martin Luther King Jr. was motivated and inspired by Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, the president of Morehouse College, King's alma mater. And even Usher guided a young Justin Bieber into and through the spotlights of superstardom. Just as Caleb was chosen by God to be the bearer of wisdom, guiding the next generation into their inheritance of the promised land, our young people today need wisdom and guidance from folks who have been around the block before. So I encourage you, with your valuable life experiences, to have faith like a child, look for places where God is at work, and help guide this next generation through participating with God in the creative act of bringing the kingdom of heaven to this earth. Last, in case you need any further proof of how amazing today's young people are and how they're being the very hands and feet of God leading us onward, I want to share these examples with you. 6 years ago, at the age of 18, Dutch inventor Boyan Slat founded the Ocean Cleanup, the largest ocean cleanup project in the world. The cleanup systems, which will be created and supplied in full force by next year, are estimated to eliminate half of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch every 5 years, leading to the potential for a plastic-free ocean by 2050. Miranda Wang and Jenny Yao, each 24 years old, are co-founders of BioCollection, a chemical recycling technology that breaks down previously non-recyclable plastics and converts it into valuable base chemicals. With their process, each ton of plastics turns over into $2,500 worth of chemicals and prevents 20 tons of carbon dioxide from being emitted. In 2015, Kelsey Juliana, then 19 years old, joined 20 other youth from ages 8 to 18 in filing a lawsuit against the federal government's mismanagement of the climate, and their case continues to be fought in federal courts to this day. Today's young minds aren't limited to eco issues either, but they're also taking on other difficult social problems. For example, Brennan Hatton and Rick Martin, 25 and 28 years old respectively, bring diversity and inclusivity training into the 21st century with their program called Equal Reality. Their program uses virtual reality to allow users to literally see the world from the perspective of other races, genders, and ability levels. 24-year-old Yosef Albanawi and 25-year-old Gautam Shebralu are attacking the opioid crisis through revolutionary technology called Pilive. They created a pill bottle that syncs to a smartphone app to manage and disperse opioid pills, which provides both doctors and patients with increased accountability in regards to these pharmaceuticals. These young people are taking revolutionary actions to solve modern day problems, and there's a lot more where that came from. I can't talk about it all today, but if you want to see more stories like this, check out Forbes 2019 30 Under 30 list. It has a bunch of incredible stories there, amazing things young people are doing. And I will also make sure to include some links with next week's weekly news. So if you're interested in some of the things I mentioned today, you can go to their websites and find out more about them, and even how you can participate if you're interested. Just as God was leading the Hebrews into the promised land, God also leads us today. So be teachers, always ready to join in the ancient tradition of wisdom sharing, using your experiences to help guide others. And be like children, always keeping your eyes open for places where God is leading us, ready to step up humbly and participate in creating a better world. Amen.